Edutrainment Workshops, the insurance industry's leading education and training platform, presents Life Insurance, the entry-level series, the products, the underwriting, and the planning applications to position your practice as the premier provider of insurance products in your community. Get on board, get on track, get to where you're going. And now, your Edutrainer, national insurance columnist, Steve Savant.
Well, welcome everyone. I'm Steve Savant, your Edutrainer and coach for our Edutrainment workshops and our introduction into annuities. And all this week, we have to spend a complete week on indexing, the most popular annuity right now sold in America. And one of the big things that we did yesterday was go through all the indices. Wow, the choices may be even too much. The inventory is huge. If you want any of the docs that we showed you yesterday, just go ahead and write me, thebiz at brokersalliance.com, and I'll send it to you. That's THEBIZ at brokersalliance.com. And any other docs you see on us that we're using today and all the way throughout this week, we say go ahead and just write us and we'll send it to you. And if you've missed any of our shows, because we think you should go back to day one and build upon your annuity knowledge, we do it in a chronology and we set up cornerstone and foundational thinking that you need to really go through. And to go back out there and catch all those shows, just go to www.brokersalliance.com. As soon as you come to our homepage, go ahead and click on the red on-demand video button and you'll be put right in there with the Edutrainment workshops. And in addition, we also have all the archive shows for the Business Insurance Zone, our daily talk show on the internet, as well as my weekend opinion piece, Welcome to the Weekend with Steve Savant. Okay, so let's go ahead and do it. What we're going to do is we're going to really walk through this and take some serious time and be methodical about walking you through all the moving parts and a lot of the policy provisions so that you can get an idea. And a little salute to the person that helped us with this, Cheryl Moore, who is the designer and distributor of annuityspecs.com, the #1 due diligence software. I highly recommend it. If you're playing in the annuity game and you're playing in indexing, that's a piece of software that you should have. So let's go to the board and we'll start walking through some of the provisions. Again, we're on Cheryl Moore's classic annuityspecs.com, the #1 due diligence software for index annuities. And what I like about this is it can lay out all the provisions, and I can put up to 4 carriers side by side. I've just cherry picked the 4 that we're playing with right now that are really doing an outstanding job for us in our distribution channel. Now, when I'm looking at this, one of the first things I want to look at, and I may have to take a couple days on this next week or the week after, I haven't decided yet if we can get it in, because it's similar to our life series, and I might just go ahead and clip that in and put in the annuities. You need to look at a little bit of due diligence. We have the actual ratings here, and the 2 ratings that we're using right now are the 2 standard ratings. One is the rating for insurance, for the insurance industry. The other is for the financial industry. The insurance industry uses AM Best, which is a claims paying ability surveillance rating system, whereas S&P is our financial strength that's used in the financial markets. So what Cheryl's done here, in my view, is cherry picked the 2 standard gold standards of how we evaluate ratings, from claims paying ability to also financial strength. So the first thing you want to do is you look at these ratings, and remember, just a little heads up, and not in a defense of a bad rating, but in a defense of a balance sheet. A lot of times annuity carriers that are only annuity don't have the same reserve issues, and so I've noticed that some of the surveillance ratings, especially AM Best, may not give them a higher rating. But I've looked at their balance sheets from time to time, and again, I'm not the person to make that call, but I've looked at them, and when I look at the actual cash flow, the AVR, the net worth of these carriers, they're awful strong, and when I show them the CPAs or CFOs of corporations, they have a lot of comfort. So remember, sometimes the ratings don't tell the whole story. You have to use the balance sheet of the carrier. We carry all the summary statements off the convention blank, which is the state filing for all these carriers. So if you say, Steve, what do you think about this balance sheet and so forth? We can give you our opinion. We're not tax or legal advice. However, we can just say, look at this compared to some of the ones that are highly rated. You'll notice, you'll say, I'm wondering why they have a lower number. And that can be because of reserve requirements from annuity carriers that's all they do. Now, let's go to the next part. All this is really ultimately on a fixed annuity platform. If this was not on a fixed annuity platform, this may actually look like a security. And of course, we already went through the debate on that issue. It is still now declared not a security, so it's really a fixed indexed annuity, FIA if you're using the language. We've kind of stepped away from the phrase equity indexed annuity. You still see it used out in the public domain, but we think it's more accurate to use the word fixed indexed annuity. So we highly recommend to use the nomenclature and make the change. Now, when I'm looking at this, it shows the product and the name of that product, and then it says, does it give any bonus rates up front? And are those bonus rates automatically inserted into the total amount for the client? When do they have access to it? Or is that bonus rate only used if you annuitize or take withdrawal privileges? You have to look at this every time. And what I say is, if you had these 4 carriers and you were going to pick these 4 products as your core carriers, I would order the sample contract for each one of these carriers and become very familiar with the language of that contract. Because if you're going to sell something on a regular basis, that's becoming part of your core inventory. And because of that, I highly recommend that you look at this and say, okay, I'm going to go ahead and look at what does that bonus. So when I look at these bonuses, I'm going to look at, are they guaranteed? Are they with withdrawal benefits? Do they automatically go into the accumulated single deposit? Are they included or not? I always want to know that, so I'm going to include it. And what it does is it tells you any bonus rates, and if it doesn't have any, it'll say no, and it'll give you each idea. And remember, sometimes every contract, depending upon the deposit, may vary on how they credit it. You just want to make sure that you get comfortable with that idea of knowing your sample contract for each of the annuities that you do business with. Then it always is going to lay out the surrender charges. And here you can see the surrender charges of these 4 carriers. They have more bonus. They are going to have, and I've noticed if you have more bonusing, if you have a higher cap rate, a lot of times you're going to see surrender charges a lot longer, so the company feels like it has the ability to actually be profitable. Remember, the carrier has to be profitable, we have to be compensated, but the client ultimately, which is the end game target of the sale, whom we revere, has to be able to get a good deal out of this. And if I got a hold for a position of 10 years, I want to make sure that I'm going to have a good product and have a good, decent opportunity to make money using indexing. Another area that I look at is the minimum guaranteed surrender value. Almost all the boilerplates now are at 87.5%. It depends. Every carrier is different, between 1 and 3% of that number. So it could be 87.5 of 1% or all the way up to 3%. It just depends on every carrier. Again, look at your sample contract. Always have a good idea what it is. And I recommend, especially if you're going to sell these 4, instead of going ahead and going through the sample contract, AnnuitySpecs.com has already done the digest, so all the policy provisions are already laid out in this grid. It's an excellent spreadsheet. Again, I recommend it. Now I want to go to our next section of our spreadsheet and go to the next part of our policy provisions. Okay, here's our page 2, and now on the policy provisions that we're looking at on the index annuities, again, it lays out the top of the page, lays out the carriers and the products so that we can keep it all straight. And remember, some of these carriers actually have multiple product lines. So in using this software, if you wanted to display it, you could actually put 4 products at a time and put them side by side if you have a real, let's say, an affection for using one carrier over another. But I'm using just the ones that are the mainstay of each of these 4 carriers that we just happen to sell a lot out of Brokers Alliance in our channel. Now, the first thing on this page is really unique. We talked about indices yesterday, so now we're showing it to you, the indices being used by each one of these companies. Interestingly enough, one of our companies uses just the S&P 500 in one of their lead products. But I noticed in this other company, they're using the S&P 500, they're using the Dow Jones Industrial Average, and they're using a combination, depending upon the participation rate, of how they're using both of them together. But look at this other idea here with one of our lead carriers, and it's a big carrier with us. They're using the S&P 500, the S&P Mid-Cap 400, the Dow Jones Industrial Average, the NASDAQ 100, the Russell 2000, Euro Stock 50, S&P 500, and the NASDAQ 100. So it's really, and when you look over to another one, they're using about that same mix of carriers. And what I look at that is, sometimes people just like choices. And this actual product is called Freedom Choice. They just want you to be able to have the choice. And my thing is if you have, especially if you have clients that are using securities and equities, sometimes it's good for them to talk to their registered rep to see what they think about these indices and then have them talk to you if you're not licensed. Remember, you can talk about indexing from a general point of view as a non-registered rep, but sometimes if it gets too deep, you need to defer to those who are licensed and partner sometimes with them just to make sure that you're covering yourself. And the next thing I want to look at is how frequent do they actually credit these indexes? Right now, we're broadcasting in August for some of these in 2012, and I've noticed that from August 2011 to August 2012, this has been pretty good year for the S&P 500. So a lot of people are probably very happy overall with their performance point to point. Well, when I look at index crediting, I'm looking at, is it annual? And all these are annual, but I noticed that this carrier is actually biannual, and some carriers are going month to month. Some have daily market sweeps. Everybody's different, and you want to look at this. And just a little heads up, how can I say this in a more general way? Most of the time in hold positions with mid to long-term holding where the client's going to stay in it all the way throughout the life of the contract, when I look at this, I've noticed that whether you go annual point to point, monthly point to point, daily sweeps, 2-year point to point, most of the time, by the time you get out 10 years or so, they seem to all coalesce about that time. So if I'm on a long hold position, I don't know if that's going to make that much difference, but I'm just pointing out that the longer you hold it, the odds are they'll coalesce together. And again, not that that's perfect thinking, but there it is. And then the index, we're talking about the frequency, and then here's the index method. Quarterly point to point, monthly point to point, annual point to point, and I like this one over here, 2-year point to point. And I noticed that in life insurance, there's ones that even go to 5-year point to point, and that's a whole nother thinking and strategy that a lot of people look at and like, by the way, especially with indexed UL. Interestingly enough, there's not as many moving parts on index annuities, and that's why that cap rates are so low, because the actual carriers that are in life indexing actually have other places to make their money. Cost of insurance, some of their admin charges, their premium front-end load. There's a lot of place to play and actually make money, so the caps are much higher. In fact, I think the leading cap I've seen in index life right now is at 17% in this date, whereas the leading one that I've seen out on the street right now is probably around 6%, somewhere in that vicinity is the leading cap rate. So some people say, well, should I be in life or indexing? The longer you are thinking about holding it and the healthier the client is, I might look at both and then come up with a math model and see which one is going to deliver the best for the client. Then the big bugaboo, here's our first one, participation rate. Not only can you participate in different levels, like some of them are 60%, some of them are 80%, 100%. Some even go over the line and say, I'll participate as much as 140%. Participate. So what's the cap and what's the par rate? If my cap rate is 6% and I have 100% participation, that's great. What if it gave you 140%? There'd be a little bit bump there. So you just want to make sure participation rates, and then again, the cap rates. Look how they're all over the board. And that's why it's so important to understand your core carrier index annuity, because again, this is everywhere. I'm looking at the cap rates right now, and remember, these are anywhere from 5% cap rates all the way up to, like I said, right now we're up at somewhere right around 6 on some of these currently, and you have to be able to always make sure that you always call in to your channel, like ours at Brokers Alliance, and call in and say, what's the new cap rate? How much does this change? It changes so much that Eric and I, who's our annuity specialist, thought about doing 2 shows a month because the frequency changes are so great. We just want to keep you fully apprised. We do it once a month now. We may have to go twice a month just to keep up. So I'm always looking at, when I'm looking at this sheet, I'm looking at the indexing method. I'm looking at the participation rate. How much can I participate? And I also want to look at the cap rate, the indexes that are being used, and the index crediting frequencies. I have all this. This is all laid out on a spreadsheet so that you can know it. Again, I highly recommend that your core carriers, like say you have 4 that you sell on a frequent basis, that you understand all this, getting it from annuityspecs.com, and order the sample contracts so that you're well aware of the language and how to explain it to a client so that you can really do a good job when you're selling index annuities.
This has been an Edutrainment Workshop, the educational division of the National Insurance Clearinghouse, the marketing arm of Brokers Alliance.